Hello, today I'm presenting an article on distance education and students who are hard of hearing, specifically to how distance learning programs were implemented in Saudi Arabia in the wake of COVID-19 and the following 2 years. So in this study, the writers examined interviews with 37 parents who were parents of students with deafness or hard of hearing. They had a variety between cochlear implants, between hearing aids, not using hearing aids, and all the way from mild to severely profound. In these interviews, the parents of children with deafness gave input on the programs that were implemented. When COVID-19 occurred in Saudi Arabia, they forbade all their students from attending school, as did many countries, I believe every country, and implemented a distance learning program that had been created by the government. Um, and many teachers had not been trained in this program, as many teachers around the world found themselves suddenly teaching lessons digitally, while many of their materials and strategies were tailored to an in-person classroom. And this especially was difficult for students of deafness who relied mainly on gestures and facial expressions, as well as in-person trial and error to determine what was being meant. So distance learning presented special challenges for these students. Results showed that the teachers did not have the skill set to successfully teach students of deafness remotely, as well as students with deafness struggled to understand the content material, and existing reading and math difficulties increased in those content areas. The students in this study, well, the parents that they represented were age 7 to 15, so there was a wide variety of abilities and grade levels represented. The authors had very strong opinions about remote learning, as well as what the school system should be doing to support students with deafness. First of all, they argued that remote learning is not available to everyone. Many families do not have the technology available to support remote learning, as well as the parents are not as familiar with the programs in order to support their students. Furthermore, the resources that are necessary to support students with deafness are even less developed. Thinking about lessons being subtitled, as well as the heavy use of graphics and imagery, as many of the students were not at a point to read independently, much less listen independently. They also argued that during any distance learning program, parents have to take that additional time to provide support to their children. Learning is a social activity, and students being engaged on an online platform is a very different kind of social engagement. And so they require both social activity with them and their parents, as well as that conversation to understand what's going on in the lesson. And many parents do not have that kind of time outside of work and their own at-home responsibilities to then be a teacher, classroom facilitator for their child. Also, they argued that remote learning lacks focus, engagement, and motivation, which are necessary to any student, any child, even more so for students who are deaf. They struggle to stay on task and focus during lessons. 10% of the parents reported that their students were not paying attention to their teacher and were instead looking at online videos instead of being in class, which is concerning. As to my opinion about all of this, first of all, I noticed that only 2 of the participants who were parents were also deaf. All of the students that were represented by their parents had some level of deafness, but only 2 of the participants were deaf. And from our textbook reading this week, it seemed that there was a vast difference between parents of deafness and the relationship with their children, and hearing parents who are raising children with deafness. And it seemed like parents who were also deaf, they could communicate with their students, with their children more effectively than parents who were hearing, because parents who were hearing had to learn sign language later in life, which kind of ties in with my last point on this slide, that a lot of teachers do not know sign language. And Their lessons are very much supposed to be an in-person engagement where you can walk around the classroom, notice where students are as far as the content, provide that one-on-one support right then and there, using a variety of communication methods, whatever is suitable for that child, and all of that was taken away. And the way the article was phrased seemed to put it on the teacher. The parents had their dissatisfaction with the programs and with the educational support seemed to imply that the teachers were the ones who were at fault, which I do not see as true. I personally know a lot of teachers who struggle to help students with learning disabilities as well as specific language disabilities digitally, and they did not have much success because the learning program was new, students were unmotivated, parents were not supportive, and the learning gap was already there and it was just widening. And the most they could do was try to help it widen, not so much. So I disagree with some of the way that the article was phrased. There certainly does need to be a system in place in case something like COVID-19 happens again, so that students are properly supported. As that middle point, COVID-19 was thrust on everybody. It took teachers by surprise, parents by surprise, and students by surprise. And by proxy, it took the deaf community by surprise. There were a lot of supports that we took for granted in a physical classroom setting, and many resources were not made available to the deaf community, and that is something that needs to change. As far as application to practice, first of all, teachers would do well to either get paid for their time or just do it on their own, but to digitize lessons and be prepared to work online if students are chronically absent for whatever reason, as well as be used to using those alternative communication methods such as gestures and pictures, in addition to the usual classroom activities. We think about how some students have to be absent every so often for doctor's visits. You think about students who are chronically ill, who are going through unfortunate diagnoses. They may not want to be out of school, but because of their diagnosis, they need to go to the doctor for checkups and for treatments. And you want things to be available for them as well. And who's to say that a student who is deaf will not need those supports? Is it available to them? Furthermore, the article suggested offering individualized tutoring for students on the distance learning platform. It argued that distance learning was a strategy that can be used effectively if it's implemented in a proper way, even for students with deafness. And that whole class communication on a digital platform is really daunting for students. So being able to provide that one-on-one support outside of the general class setting can make distance learning a bit more successful for students with deafness. Provides a little bit of more of that time, that trial and error to understand one another, and then be able to teach content a little more effectively. Finally, using pictures and gestures so that students of all learning styles and ability have an opportunity to engage and understand, and not just limiting that expressiveness to the classroom, because language is a combination of those gestures, of that physical stance, of your expressiveness, as well as what sounds you are making and the shape of your mouth. So using all of that on a digital platform, being comfortable with the camera, as well as being comfortable in the classroom is vital to a successful classroom for students with deafness. And my resources are here, my references. We've just got the article and then the textbook. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great week.